Hello, welcome to today's session. Today we are talking about the power of child-led play. So if you have joined me for any of my other sessions, you'll notice there's a bit of a theme that I love building independence in kids and letting kids take the lead and explore at their own pace. And this one is really about that piece where we, the adults, get to follow along. And child-led play, as you'll see, might look a little messy and a little silly and even a lot chaotic, but it's incredibly important. So thanks for joining me today. I'm really excited to talk about something that is not just backed by research, but it's also really full of joy. So whether you're a parent, grandparent, caregiver, early childhood educator, your presence here means that you care a lot about the kids and giving them what they need to grow, and play is one of the biggest things. So let's get started. So our focus for today is going to be why child-led play matters, what it looks like in real life, and how to support it at home. So it's not going to be a list of things to do. There's going to be no Pinterest perfect setups or required materials. It's really understanding about what play does for our kids and how to support it in simple, joyful ways that are simple and joyful for the whole family. And so we'll start by digging into the why, the research and the brain science that explains why letting kids take the lead in play is so powerful. Then we'll look at what it looks like. So you can recognize child-led play when you see it. It looks a lot like just playing, but it is a lot more. And then finally, we'll talk about you and your role in encouraging it, joining it when you need to, making your home a place where play is welcomed and celebrated. Okay, why child-led play matters. Simply put, it's how kids learn best. Kids learn through play. So child-led play is any play where the child gets to make the decisions. So that can be what they play, how they play, who they play with. It's different from adult-led activities where we're trying to teach something specific. And we'll kind of compare them in a couple slides here of what that looks like. But this kind of play can be dramatic play, building forts, pretend cooking, making up silly games. It can even just be laying in the grass, staring at the sky, or chasing a butterfly, things like that. So it often looks random or repetitive to adults. But that's the magic in it. Repetition builds mastery and imagination builds brains. So think of yourself more as the stage manager, kind of setting the environment, while your kid is the playwright and the star performer. So child-led play is really directed by their interests and curiosity. So instead of, okay, we're going to learn about butterflies today, it's maybe going outside and seeing where their interest leads, or allowing them to kind of choose the direction it goes. It's more open-ended and imaginative, so not so much, that closed board game, but more that open world experiential sort of play. And as I mentioned, it's messy and noisy and wonderfully chaotic. So child-led play builds brains. Play builds brains. Play is the brain's favorite way to learn. And when kids lead the play, they're really exercising core brain systems without even realizing it. So that works on executive functioning. So in child-led play, kids are constantly planning, organizing, making decisions, revamping, recreating when plans don't go accordingly, whether they're running in imaginary pet shop or building a spaceship out of couch cushions. They're setting goals, they're figuring out the steps and how they need to get there and adjusting as they go. If they're they've decided they're going to build a rocket ship out of their couch cushions and the cushions aren't quite reaching, they've got to move the coffee table closer. They've got to get maybe some clothespins or something that's going to hold things. They're adjusting as they go. And these are really executive functioning skills in action. They're critical tools for managing time, following multi-step directions, navigating real-world challenges. These are skills that they need going forward. It also helps develop memory. So free play activates working memory and long-term memory in ways that, worksheets and kind of that table work can't. So kids will remember the rules that they made up for their dinosaur kingdom. They'll know the roles that they assigned to their stuffed animal parade. I can still remember looking back at my childhood teddy bears. I can tell you when we played family which teddy bear played which role. I still know who my teddy bear grandma was. Those things really stick with you. And so as a kid, you remember these rules and roles. Or they'll remember the steps in their pretend baking recipe. If you're outside and they've got a bucket of water and they're putting sand and leaves and all sorts of things in it and making a witch's brew or something, chances are pretty good they'll be able to tell you what they put in it. So they hold on to those details because they're important to them. They can recall past play sessions. They build an ability to store and retrieve that information, which is really essential in the foundations for academic learning. Attention. So if you were in my last session, I talked a lot about attention and related to outdoor play. Child-led play and outdoor play have a lot of overlap in their benefits. And so attention is one of those things. You've probably noticed if you've ever watched kids, they'll get totally lost in play. They get that deep focus where they're just so ingrained in their play schema and their whole little world they've got going on. So child-led play really nurtures that sustained attention because the kids are invested in what they're doing. It's their own creation. And it's really meaningful to them, even if as an outsider, we're looking thinking, what the heck are they doing? It's really impactful and meaningful to them. So they're really invested. They practice tuning out distractions and sticking with the task and following their curiosity, which all helps build the kind of focus needed for later classroom learning and kind of those everyday tasks. Emotional regulation. So big feelings often show up during play, and that's a good thing. So whether it's frustration when their spaceship cushion contraption falls over, disappointment when the game ends, or excitement that gets a little too big. The emotional highs and lows offer a chance to practice that emotional regulation. Oftentimes, there's been some research that's indicating now we really try and cushion our kids from a lot of those tough situations to try and avoid that conflict, which is really too bad because then they don't get the practice, right? We can't learn emotional regulation unless we're practicing it. And it's something we have to continually practice all the time. And play is one of the best ways to do that. So I'm not saying if your kids are getting into fisticuffs that you're not jumping in, but it's working through some of that frustration and working through this isn't working right, or something goes really well and it's so exciting that we get kind of overwhelmed with that flood of joy and excitement. And the more we do those things, the more we practice being able to regulate ourselves and bring ourselves back to baseline. So through play, children really learn to, name their feelings, to calm themselves, to keep going when things don't go their way. If you've ever watched kids play house or superheroes or whatever, they'll assign feelings to those characters and they act out scenes. And so they're really learning that emotional regulation through their play as well. There's that social piece in there too. So language development, child-led play is full of rich language opportunities, from storytelling to those pretend conversations I mentioned, to describing what they're doing and negotiating with siblings or peers, other playmates, even yourself if they're trying to explain to you how this play works, this imaginative world where they've created roles and rules, and they have to communicate with you how to play in those rules. And no, you're not stirring, that's not soup. I know the soup is over there. You need to do This isn't the soup. This is the lasagna. We don't need to stir it. It's going in the oven. That's all a lot of communication. And so play gives them reasons to speak, to listen, to explain, and to imagine, which are all really critical building blocks for communication, reading, and writing. Then there's this cognitive flexibility at the end. So child-led play really encourages kids to adapt and shift perspectives and come up with new solutions on the fly. This is one of those things that is so, so crucial for kids, and something that often our really structured play doesn't really work on teaching them a lot because we take that on. So as adults, we are pretty good at being flexible most of the time. And we work hard on, kind of going with the flow, and we'll take on a lot of that load for our kiddos. So if something does go wrong, we tend to work pretty hard to smooth it over, or to fix it, or to, shift gears to do something else. But in a way that takes off some of that cognitive flexibility from the child. So this child-led natural play is really a great way for them to practice that. Whether they're navigating an unexpected plot twist in pretend play with a peer, or they're figuring out a new way to stack blocks, or going back to that spaceship couch analogy, it's not really working. They have to reconfigure their plan. Their brains are practicing how to think in flexible and creative ways. So this kind of mental agility really helps them handle change, solve problems, and approach challenges with resilience, which is a tricky thing to teach outside of play. Okay, so let's look what the research says. So the research says that child-led natural play builds resilience and independence. So now if you'll remember back to my talk on outside play, it was the same stuff, right? It's building that resiliency and that grit and that independence. So free self-directed play is linked to stronger academic performance later on. Not because the kids are, learning math during play, but because they're learning how to learn. So they're really teaching their brains how to learn, how to process information, how to take that and then shift with it, how to accept new feedback to change our perspective. It's really fostering that lifelong learning. And when kids feel ownership over their activities, they become curious and motivated and persistent. And these are all the predictors of these aren't all the predictors. These are all predictors of success in school and life. So studies show that play builds resilience. So a child who takes a risk, fails, and then tries again in play learns flexibility and grit. Without any of the pressures of, grades or outcomes, or even just that, the pressure of kind of a structured play of a winning or a losing situation. It's in that free, low stakes environment where it's not so much a win and lose or a thing like that. It's more just that, okay, that didn't work. What else can we try? So it's a really safe way for their brains to learn that skill. So it's a long-term skill building, really, that's just disguised as fun. So kids think it's fun, but it's really, it's work. It's what kids need to be doing. It's their job. Their job is to learn, and their job is to learn through play. All right, control. Child-led play is about giving kids a turn with the steering wheel. So think about a typical day in a young kid's life. We, the adults, decide pretty much everything. We generally decide, what time they're waking up, what's for breakfast. Even if, they may have some choice, they know they've got a choice of 3 things. We've still dictated those 3 things. They, go to daycare or preschool, or, maybe they stay home, but their activities are kind of decided on when they leave, when they eat, when they sleep, when they bath, when they go to the bathroom, you name it. So of course, structure is necessary and really, really important. Kids need routines and boundaries to feel safe. But within a highly scheduled day, they have very few moments when they're truly in charge. And so that's where the child-led play comes in. That becomes their time to take the wheel, to decide what's important, what story they want to tell, how they want to tell it, what world they want to build, and how they want to experience it. Uh, so that sense of autonomy, it's not just nice to have, it's a critical piece of healthy development. So when we give children the space to lead their own play, we're telling them, you are capable. You have ideas and they matter. You can make choices. You can influence things. So it builds confidence and self-efficacy, right? That belief that I can do things on my own. I can do this. And so it helps children develop those decision-making skills, problem-solving abilities, and a sense of identity, a sense of who they are. And you can see that a lot if they're doing creative, imaginative play. You might end up with that one kid who kind of ends up being the director. They're maybe a little bossy. They're telling people where they need to go, what they need to do. That kid might be a future leader, and then you might have the kid who really likes the behind the scenes organizing piece, that they can explore those identities through play and really kind of help develop that. They learn that their actions have impact. They can make mistakes and try again, and that they can shape their world even in small ways. They're foundational life skills that they'll carry into relationships, learning environments, and eventually into adulthood. We don't think about our little guys now going into adulthood, but these are really the foundational building blocks to make them good, well-adjusted humans, right? So it's also worth noting that control in play can be especially important for kids who may feel powerless in other areas of life. So kids with big emotions, kids navigating stress or change. So any upheaval, moving, family changes, loss, things like those. Or kids who are still developing the ability to express themselves with words. So a kid maybe who has limited verbal skills or abilities, things like that. That control piece is really important to give them a voice in that, even if it's not verbal words. So giving them the lead and play can offer a safe outlet, a sense of agency, and an emotional release. So even something that seems silly or repetitive, like lining up dinosaurs over and over and over, it can be a kid's way of making sense in the world, finding patterns, or even creating order where they don't feel any. So next time your child wants to, be the boss of a game or insists on making up rules to a pretend world, lean into it. See, you're not just indulging their imagination, you're also handing them the steering wheel for a little bit. And in doing that, you're helping them become confident, capable, and resilient. Okay, here's where we're going to talk a little bit about the difference between the child-led play and our structured play. So our child-led play is open-ended. It's creative and it's process-focused. Structured play is goal-oriented, adult-directed, and outcome-focused. So not all play is the same. They both have value, but it's the balance that really matters, right? So in the structured play, it's kind of the adult sets the agenda, or a board game where another adult has set the agenda, even if it's not you. It's still a prescribed play. It's kind of closed-ended. Eventually, this activity is going to end. There's kind of set rules that we go. There's not a lot of that creativity and flexibility in there. So structured play has its place. Sports, organized sports, spring soccer, lessons, guided crafts, things like that. But when it becomes the only kind of play, then kids lose the opportunity to develop independence and creativity, right? Those activities are awesome. They're great for kids. When you also have child-led, you need to have both. If you only have structured activities, we get pretty rigid and we're not allowing our kids to build some of that independence and that creativity. So child-led play gives the kids the chance to explore their own ideas and make mistakes safely. It also teaches kids how to come back from making a mistake. You know, that perfectionism can be really tricky. And when we have structured, organized things, there is kind of a right way to do it. There's a way it's supposed to go. And so making mistakes can be embarrassing and stressful. Whereas in child-led play, it really doesn't matter. That's just part of the play. So it's kind of like the difference between, coloring a coloring sheet or in a coloring book versus just making your, if we're coloring, we know we're supposed to stay in the lines. We can maybe have a little bit of flexibility on what color we use for things, but it's a little more prescribed, or an activity page, right? If we're following a maze. Whereas if we have a blank piece of paper and crayons, we can create whatever. It's a lot more open-ended. So one develops fine motor skills. So our coloring, right? We're developing fine motor skills. That's great. The other develops imagination. So both are important, but the child-led play is often where the deeper and more personal growth really happens. Okay, so what does this look like? What does child-led play look like? It looks like a kid making a restaurant from rocks and dirt, where they are serving you little bowls of sand that are pizza. It's your toddler crawling into your pile of socks while you're doing laundry and holding the socks like a baby, and now your sock is a baby. It's a kid lining up cars for no reason. No reason to us, no clear reason to us. For the child, there is a reason. So if you've ever looked at your kid and thought, what are they doing? That's probably child-led play. It might not look productive, but trust me, there's a lot going on there. So everything from doll houses, dinosaurs, dump trucks, cardboard boxes, kitchen utensils, dress up, fort building, storytelling, all the things. You don't need fancy toys or, Pinterest-worthy play setups. Kids will turn a stick into a wand. They'll turn a scarf into a cape, a pot into a drum. That's the child-led play. That's where that magic is happening. So the key isn't in what they have, it's what they do with it. So give them time and space, your attention when you can. This is also something they could do independently too. We'll talk about that. They have to learn how to do it, but their imagination will do the rest. So this co-play and modeling is really important. The main message here is that you can play with kids without taking over the play. So join in, but let them lead. If they say you're a cat, you're a cat. If they're cooking soup from leaves, ask them what kind of soup. Be a sidekick, not the director, right? We're not controlling the play. So you're present, you're there, you're going along with it. You're following their lead, and you're asking kind of those open-ended questions, right? What are you making? Can I help with anything? Instead of, well, why don't we do it this way? Or, well, that doesn't really make sense. Because it makes sense to them. And maybe that's your goal for the day, is to figure out what their play schema is without asking them that or telling them that that's your goal, but try and figure out, go along with it and see. Your role isn't to direct, it's to be a play partner, when you're invited, and a safe, encouraging presence when you're not. So, if your kid is engaged in their play thing and they're jiving and they don't want you to play with them, let them do their process. I like this little acronym, OWL: observe, wait, and listen. So kind of, if your kid is engaging in some free play, kind of watch what they're doing. If you're going to join in, maybe, you sit down with them, you watch, you kind of see what they're doing, try and kind of follow their lead and listen. If they say, no, not like that, no, that's not what we're doing. Okay, then what are we doing? Go along with it. When we do that and when we follow their lead, what we're basically telling them is, your ideas matter and I trust you, which is really powerful. It's really empowering for kids to hear that. And it's sometimes hard as an adult because kids are way more creative than we are. So it can be hard a little bit sometimes to let go of that. Well, that's not how that works, or that doesn't really make sense. So we'll talk a little bit more about getting silly in a minute. But first, I'd really like to, oh, no, don't start yet. Okay. I want to talk about two kind of children's entertainers who are really, really good at this. And that is Mr. Rogers and Blippi. And I know a lot of parents maybe don't like Blippi because he can be a little bit annoying. However, Blippi is a really fantastic model for how to follow a child's lead and play like a child. So Mr. Rogers was kind of the groundbreaker on this one. He really showed us to wonder with kids. And then Blippi might not be for everyone, but he really embodies how kids experience the world, right? It's big emotions, big movements, big curiosity. He's really on their level. Both of these two get it. They're very opposite in tone. So Mr. Rogers is calm and gentle, but he's just as in tune with how kids feel and think. He validates their emotions, and he really invited play through reflection. So these two models show us that there's no right way to engage, just that being truly present, curious, and respectful matters more than any script. So these two have very different approaches, but really model that same idea. So in this clip here, it's not actually Mr. Rogers. It's from the movie where Tom Hanks plays Mr. Rogers, from A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, which I highly recommend if you haven't watched it. But in this clip, we'll see a really good example of what we're talking about with that. We'll talk about it after. I'll play the video.
And action.
Do you know what this is? It's a tent. Let's set it up. Mercy. You're a bit trickier than I thought. Oh. I can't do it. It must take two grown-ups to set up a tent.
And that's a cut. Let's go again.
No, let's look at that.
Okay, roll playback, please.
Mercy. You're a bit trickier than I thought.
You know, we could preset a
No,
tent for you.
no, I think this is good. Yeah. Yeah, I think we're okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. That's lunch, everybody.
Oh.
But the tent, why didn't you let them set it up for you?
Well, children need to know that even when adults make plans, sometimes they don't turn out the way we'd hoped.
So I really like that clip for a few reasons. And I think Mr. Rogers did such a good job of having that kind of calm, empathetic energy, but kind of a similar approach to how a child would experience something. And I mentioned earlier that often as adults, we kind of want to smooth things over. And so you could see the production team immediately kind of chuckled and then, okay, we'll redo it or we can have it set up. But he inherently understood that no, kids need to see that too. Kids need to see struggle and even his process as he's doing it. And he goes, oh, this is trickier than I thought. That self-talk and that self-narration is really how kids experience the world, but he did it in a really calm way. So I just think it's a really great example of, even though there isn't a kid in the video, he's really getting on their level and kind of experiencing things in a similar way to what a child may have. They probably wouldn't have been as calm about it, but the same sort of idea. So then our next clip is Blippi. Now, before you turn off your screen because you think you can't handle listening to Blippi anymore, try and watch him through this lens. Try and watch him as a model who's approaching the world with energy, curiosity, playfulness, and through a lens of how a child would, and really kind of modeling that silly play where he's still learning and teaching through play. So watch this next clip. Bear with it. I promise I won't make you watch any more Blippi after that one.
You can do with this. It's so much fun. You can actually smash it flat. Watch this trick. Where'd it go? Oh, that's silly. Okay, let's peel it off. Wow, perfect. And then, now you can use these. Yeah, they're like cookie cutters, but these are definitely not cookies that we're making. I would not eat this, okay? All right, okay. Yeah, remember that airplane? Whoa! Yeah, check it out. Okay, now you push it down. Whoa, look. Cut an airplane out. But first, let's push it out of here. Wow. Yeah, we did such a good job. Whoa! Wow. Okay, I'll put that airplane right there. Now, let's bring all the colors that we have out. And then, let's see what we can make together. Okay, so let's put that green back. And we have the airplane right there. What else? Oh, we have some letters. We have, ooh, a dog. Woof, woof. Will you act like a dog with me? Ready? Woof, 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 woof. Wow. Dogs are so cute. Okay, let's make a blue dog. That sounds pretty silly, doesn't it? Okay, you know what to do. Smash out your clay nice and flat. Oh, okay, there we go. All right, push it down. All right. Whoa, look at that. Whoa! Pull the sides away. Wow, and now, oh, that's silly. Look, what is that? Yeah, it's a little poochie. Woof, 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 woof. Whoa! Okay, we'll save you. We'll put you right there. Perfect. All right, one pooch and one airplane. Huh, perfect.
Well, I realize that Blippi might not be somebody that you'd want to invite over for a barbecue and hang out with on a Friday night. Your kids probably would. And there's a reason. He's fun. And really, when you look at it objectively, he's doing a lot of teaching in that stretch. Now, I know this isn't child-led because there's no kid in there, But I think you could picture how either of those two videos would have gone with a child there. The child would have led the play, but both adults would have jumped right in at their level, right? Blippi, really silly, really high energy, engaged, but still teaching lots of really great words like smash and pull. And, there's lots of verbs in there, and worked on colors and animals and sounds and some counting and letters. And, even the way he's smashing the Play-Doh, he didn't roll it out perfectly like an adult would. He smashed it like a kid would and got right to their level. And, Mr. Rogers, you could see him setting up a tent with a kid in the same kind of way where, this is tricky. This isn't really working how we thought it would. What do you think we should do? And letting the kid problem solve and try it and fail. And so these two are very kind of opposite energies, but ultimately doing the same thing. They're engaging with kids in a really natural way, and they really they get it, right? They understand that that's how kids need to learn. Okay, no more Blippi now. I'm done. Okay, child-led play sounds great, but I'm worried. Let's be honest. So many of us have those little thoughts that pop up when we watch our kids play. Like, are they really learning anything? Should I be doing more? I look bored. Is that bad? These worries are normal, especially in a world that celebrates productivity and outcomes, right? But child-led play is the quiet powerhouse of learning. Like I said, this is what teaches kids how to learn. So just because it doesn't come in worksheets and check marks, it doesn't mean that it's not educational. This is some of the most important learning they'll do. And if you'll notice there, I see that I've written that boredom sparks creativity. Our kids in our modern world are constantly entertained. Our kids need to be bored. Boredom is really, really great for kids and development. That's what teaches us to be creative. That's what teaches us to go and do and try. And, even on the weekend, I was busy working on some stuff. My son really wanted me to play with him. And I told him that I had to get some of my house stuff done and whatever. So we were kind of going back and forth. And after a while, then he finally kind of wandered off. And all of a sudden, he was rummaging through his room, and he'd gotten a rock polisher for Christmas, and he totally forgot about it. So he pulled it out and he got it set up. And, with a little bit of help, he's a little bit older, he's 9, but after a little bit of help, all of a sudden, he's got it kind of up and running. And then his sister joined in, who's younger. And then they went out in the yard and they were gathering some rocks up. And they were talking about all the cool creative things that they could maybe make with these rocks. And so they got the rock polisher going, and it's tumbling away, and they're making plans for a jewelry business, apparently, that they're going to start. And they've already decided which rocks they're going to use for their grandmas for Christmas, that they're going to make some necklaces for them. And just all these really cool things that if I would have stopped and played the board game that they'd been asking to play, we still would have had fun. And, we would have worked on some numeracy and stuff for that. But they created this really cool plan. And so now the rocks have been tumbling for 2 weeks now. And, they're getting closer in their process. But they're really looking forward to it. They're already planning the next steps and how they're going to kind of grow this idea. And we have a wedding coming up in Canmore in September. And they're already talking about in Canmore, they might be able to find some pretty cool rocks. So maybe they could gather some rocks that they could bring back to give to my cousin, who's the bride, after as a gift of a memento from her wedding. So just really cool, creative ideas. It's very thoughtful. It's really cool. And so, I've got that little note in there that says small moments matter. That it wasn't that long. It wasn't, hours of extended time. I was still busy. I was still doing my thing. But they had a little bit of agency to kind of go with it. And there was definitely learning happening there. And then, it led to all sorts of conversations about how the rock tumbler works, how it's polishing the rocks, what the friction is doing, all those things that were really cool learning conversations. My son asked, well, can we put in one really big rock? I said, well, no, because you need the other rocks to bounce off it, and that's what smooths it. And, lots of really cool conversations that generated from that. That's something they were interested in. If I would have sat them down at the table and said, okay, we're learning about rocks, they probably wouldn't have been as interested. So we really just let the play flow. And now this is carried on over a couple weeks that we're working on. So if you're questioning, are they learning anything, or should I be doing more? If they're just sitting lining up cars, well, no, they are doing something. They're doing important work. The other piece of this is I'm too busy. And you don't have to do it all. You don't need to dedicate hours a day to child-led play. I want to say that loud and clear. This is not a prescribed thing. This is the small pockets of time. It could be 10 minutes here, a stretch of quiet while you make supper, some relaxing time before bed. It can make a big difference. Kids thrive when they know they have permission to follow their curiosity. They don't need constant adult direction to do that. And I did already mention boredom is good. Boredom's so good. It's uncomfortable, but it's a launch pad. So when a kid says, I'm bored, what they're really saying is, I'm between ideas. And sometimes that's where we have to have a little bit of patience. We can't rush to fill that space. Try waiting. You might be surprised what they come up with. And when they are engaged in those play moments, try to protect those play moments. Limit the interruptions. Avoid jumping in with either fixing it or making a suggestion. Or if you said, you know what, give me 10 minutes to finish this thing, and then we'll do whatever. But in that 10 minutes, they've gone and they've immersed themselves in some plaything. Leave it. Unless if it's scheduled, you have to go. That's different. But if it was, okay, in 10 minutes, we're going to play a board game, let them do their thing. That's really important play that they're doing. So step back a little bit. Trust that they've got this. One of the other things too, when we talk about that boredom piece, research has shown it takes kids about 45 minutes to get fully immersed in a play schema. So if you've ever noticed, if you've been at, a family gathering or something, or there's a play date and a group of kids and, they kind of start that, I'm bored. What do I do? I don't know what to do. Blah, blah, blah. And then after they finally kind of get to it, after a while, all of a sudden they don't want to leave. They're in the middle of a game. They've created a Home Alone sort of situation in one of the rooms, and there's ropes and there's string tied everywhere, and they've got obstacles and whatever it is. But they've really immersed themselves in it. And that's probably after that 45-minute mark. They had to be bored. They had to be bored. It had to spark that creativity and give them the space and time to do it. So you don't have to do it all. This is on the kids. And it may take, if this is something your kid has never had, they've never experienced a lot of free play, and it's been a lot of structured activities, it may be uncomfortable at the start. It may be a little tricky for them to get down to brass tacks and kind of do it. So be patient with the process. Eventually they'll get there and you'll notice that creativity. The other thing that comes with child-led play is mess. might make the adults a little bit twitchy, but I know, right? Sticky fingers, paint on the table, Lego scattered everywhere. It can feel very overwhelming, especially at the end of a day when you've cleaned up another snack and stepped on another piece of toy, and goodness hope it wasn't a piece of Lego. But here's the thing. Mess is often a sign that deep learning is happening. So when a child is up to their elbows in mud or has dressed the dog in a superhero cape and every piece of costume jewelry they own, they're not just making a mess. They're experimenting, they're problem solving, they're creating stories, they're figuring out the world in hands-on, full body way. Okay, so think about mud play for a second. It might look like pure chaos, but it's actually a science experiment in action. They're exploring textures, cause and effect, volume, gravity. They're testing what holds together and what doesn't. They're making decisions. They're revising their ideas and trying again. So when we zoom out, that messy play really supports all these things I have listed here, right? There's that deep learning. We talked about that creativity. Sorry, I'm going back. Deep learning. So when things get messy, it often means that kids are fully engaged. That's not just play. It's brains firing on all cylinders. The chaos is often a sign that rich and complex learning is happening right in front of us. Creativity. Messy play gives the kids the freedom to invent and imagine. So whether they're mixing potions from dirt and grass or building a spaceship from cardboard, really on spaceships today, apparently, they're exploring ideas in a way that structured tasks just can't offer. They're building that problem solving. That messy play is often full of trial and error. Will it stick together? What if I try it this way? Kids make decisions, they test them out, they revise, they try again. It's real world problem solving in action. It's that scientist, it's that experimentation. It supports motor skills. Pouring, scooping, squeezing, stacking, rolling, running, jumping, climbing. It's all those fine and gross motor skills. Finger painting and mud pie. These are activities that strengthen the muscles and coordination that kids need for tasks like dressing themselves, buttons and zippers and writing. It boosts language and social play. So messy play often happens alongside storytelling or role playing. This is where costumes can get involved. So things like, you be the dragon. No, I'm the dragon. Okay, well then I'll be the knight. This is our potions lab. What do you want to put in? No, that doesn't go in here. That's for that potion. So it invites collaboration, negotiation, lots of language use, even for quieter kids. And even if it's not verbal language, there's still communication. One of the best things you can do is to create a mess-friendly zone. So you don't have to sacrifice your whole house to the cause. I get that, but I don't either. But having designated areas like the backyard, the bath, plastic tablecloth on the kitchen floor, it can help you set boundaries while still saying yes to the mess. And you can work with that with your comfort level. I started out with a pretty limited mess range, and now my kids are a little bit older, so they can help in that cleanup piece too. But I've also learned to let go a little bit, that it is just mess. It doesn't mean that we have to love having spaghetti stuck to our walls or glitter ground into the carpet. Boundaries are good. That's not allowed in my house either. But if we can shift our mindset even just a little bit, we might start to see that these messes are temporary and worthwhile. A great place to start is water stuff. Play with water and kind of making peace with it, that, okay, the floor might get wet. I can mop it. Clothes might get wet. That's okay. We can take them off. We have the benefit of living in a rural area, but my kids are notorious for going outside and getting as dirty as they can. They love playing in mud and making mud pies and doing this whole thing, but they know when they come to the door, they got to strip on the deck and then make a run for it to the bathtub. It's something I had a hard time with at the beginning because it was mess. And when I was a kid, I wasn't allowed to bring mess into the house. And I still don't love mess in my house. But so we try really hard to, keep the mess outside, but also understanding that, if I have to sweep and mop the path that goes from the front door to the bathtub, it's worth it for all that exploratory, deep learning that they had done outside. And just when you look at them, they're happy and they're giggling and they're learning together. So instead of looking at that mess as, oh, what a disaster, try and look at it of, wow, they were really into it today. Also with boundaries and stuff, they can help clean up. And remember, it's okay if messy play makes you a little uncomfortable. It's not about perfection. It's about progress, right? I'm not saying let your house become a total free-for-all, but maybe create some boundaries and expectations within there to allow for some of that creative, messy play. So messy play really builds brains and memories. So the next time you maybe see some paint smears, or they're, maybe building castles out of their Cheerios and falling on the floor and a Cheerio got stepped on and crushed, take a breath and try and think, okay, this is learning in action. And that's okay. The mess is the evidence, right? The mess is the evidence that learning has been taking place. All right, supporting child-led play at home. We talked about kind of creating some of those yes spaces for safe exploration. We can rotate toys instead of buying more. They don't need more stuff. Saying yes to silly ideas within reason, obviously keeping things safe and whatever, but kind of even questioning some of your held beliefs, maybe things that you were told no when you were a kid, and thinking about why. I remember when I was a kid, all I wanted to do was go run in the rain. I wanted to run in the rain so bad, and I was told no because it would be such a mess. And when I became an adult, I remember my kids asked me, and I thought, no, you can't go run in the mud puddle. And then I stopped, and I thought, okay, but why? Is it just mess? I can handle some mess. I should have actually thought of, I just thought of an example I should have put as a video. My kids still talk about it. I surprised them. We had a really huge puddle. It stopped raining, but we had a really, really huge puddle in the ditch. And the kids asked if they could play in it. And so I made the kind of this big production of, well, sure, you can, but make sure it doesn't go over your boots and whatever. So they're in there stepping all tentatively. And I snuck in from behind and I ran and I penguin slid right through the puddle on my tummy in my hoodie and pants. I thought my kids' jaws were going to hit the ground. They could not believe that I had been so silly, and I got so messy. And so the three of us spent the rest of the afternoon making a slip and slide out of our lawn in this puddle and had the best time. So when we were done, my husband brought a big garbage bag and we put all our big muddy wet stuff in and it went straight into the washing machine and we got cleaned up. And really the whole cleanup took 5 minutes. It really didn't even take that long. It was a shower and a couple of wet footprints. But it is a memory that has really stuck with them. And so that's where I've got kind of this tagline of say yes and do less. Now, that doesn't mean say yes to everything. I'm not talking about permissive parenting. That's a very different topic. This is saying yes to things that really, why not? And kind of that do less. Don't jump in right away with solutions. This child-led play doesn't mean doing more. It actually often usually means doing less, right? Less leading, less correcting, less structure. Let them surprise you. Let's see where it takes them. You don't need to have planned activities for everything. We don't need themed everything and everything to be planned. Let them see where it goes. So what you'll see at home is a lot of really great things, right? When we follow their lead, we build their trust and the kids feel seen. So that leads to confidence in play and in life. So this isn't just theory that we're talking about. This has visible and practical impacts that you'll notice in everyday life. So first, you'll see more independent play. It doesn't mean that your kid's going to suddenly stop needing you. And like I said, this is the thing that we're going to have to build as a skill if it's not something we've already developed. So, but it might mean that they're going to begin to trust their own ideas. So when they know that they have the permission to explore and make choices and take the lead in their play, they're more likely to engage for longer stretches of time without needing constant direction or entertainment from adults. They'll start to build that internal motivation, and that's a skill that'll serve them for life. You'll also notice a richer imagination. So when kids are given the time and space to follow their own ideas, their stories get more detailed. Their play becomes more layered, it's more intricate, their creativity really flourishes. So instead of just repeating what they've seen in shows or books, they actually will start inventing whole worlds. And it'll start small, but eventually it can expand. And I would hazard a guess that most of our greatest writers, especially fantasy writers or anything kind of in that fiction realm, probably did a lot of free play as kids. They really developed those imaginations. And we've talked about that. That kind of imaginative thinking is the foundation for problem solving and innovation and storytelling. So another beautiful shift is that better emotional regulation. So play is how kids work through big feelings, confusing situations, things they don't have words for yet. So through role playing, pretending, or even physically moving through their emotions in that dramatic or messy play, they're processing it. and they're regulating. So over time, that builds that emotional resilience. And maybe one of the most meaningful changes, there might actually be more connection between you and your child. So when you step back and really follow their lead in play, whether you're joining in or if you're just observing without steering, it tells them, I see you, I trust you, I value your ideas. It's not always about playing perfectly and doing everything right. It's about being present, responsive, and respectful to their play process. So when you lean into the child play, what you get isn't just more playtime. It's more confidence, more creativity, more calm, and more connection. Which is, pretty amazing from something that could start with a cardboard box and an open mind, right? Okay, some final thoughts on this. The magic happens when we slow down and play like they do. Just think about that for a second. As you don't need fancy toys. You don't need a fancy education or more, Pinterest boards or anything. You just need time, attention, and a willingness to play. Okay, that's what they'll remember. That's what helps them grow. Okay, you've got this. Play is how kids learn. You don't have to be perfect. Trust your kids' instincts. If they're playing something, trust them. You already have what it takes to support this child-led play. You don't need anything else. Follow your kids' curiosity, encourage their ideas, and if you're not sure what to do, just sit down and watch. They'll show you, right? That's that owl, that observe, watch, listen. No, observe, wait, listen. Either W works, right? Just sit down and watch and see. And even if you don't join in, even if you just get to bear witness, that's pretty amazing. So every time you choose to follow their lead, you're building connection, confidence, and joy. Okay. All right, so some resources. I've got these on the website as well. There's a handout for some kind of starter activities, and there's a handout for resources. So these are simple, books and websites, things you can do without prep and pressure. So you don't have to do a lot of big changes, just start small. I've got some books for parents. I mentioned in our last session about Balanced and Barefoot by Angela Hanscombe. That one is up there again for this one. She talks a lot about that child-led play. Last Child in the Woods by Richard Louv is another really great one. Unstructured Play, How to Let Kids Be Kids by Whitney Caceres. I'm not sure how to say her last name, but that is a really great resource as well. There's some really cool books for kids that you can read together as a family. Things like Not a Box, What to Do with a Box, different authors, same kind of idea. Roxaboxen by Alice McLaren is a really good one. There's some really great kids books about creative play. And then there's some really excellent websites that you can check out as well. Fairy Dust Teaching has some Reggio-inspired early learning ideas. The Genius of Play is another one. There's a blog called Let the Children Play, and it's full of kind of playful ideas from an early childhood educator. And then there's a Canadian-specific one that's called Outdoor Play Canada, and they have lots of advocacy and research on unstructured outdoor play. So kind of a melding of our two presentations from the last 2 weeks. And then, as I mentioned, there's some shows that model child-led play. So Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood is a classic reflective presence. Blippi, highly energetic, really playful discovery. And then Bluey is a really excellent model of just co-play and child-led scenarios. Chili and Bandit often end up going along with Bluey and Bingo's play schemas and the ideas that they're kind of bouncing through. And so Chili and Bandit can be a pretty good role model on how to engage in child-led play with your kids and let them kind of have that control in the narrative while still having some really great parenting boundaries and rules and expectations and those sorts of things. Child-led play is not about letting our kids have free reign. It's letting them control the play. We still have to have our structure and routines and all those really great things throughout our day. It's those moments when they can be unstructured within those days. So as always, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My name again is Erin Sheehan. You can contact me through your teacher or through our division website. And I look forward to answering any questions you may have. And in the meantime, I hope you have fun getting out there and playing.